So, well, first there were some changes that I did yesterday. You're gonna see it today, but this basically is the whole wall of Perisno. We have our main continent here, the one we all know, and then we have here Nisania. This is basically where the Balahir came from, where the Sam came from. We have here, all in the north, the Isle des Draken, where, of course, the Draken come. Says that I don't know how to pronounce it, Mitch.
It's
Tell me.
Insel Drachen, but Isle of the Dragon as works too.
Okay.
Yours.
Well, this Cestadia,
Yes.
Cestacia, which is where Kulan Horde, right, come from.
Yes.
And then we have here, all along in the south hemisphere, Hakonia, where, of course, the Hakan came from.
And Telranian.
Oh, yeah, true.
Yeah.
So, well, I could talk about the winds, but nobody likes all the big scientific stuff. So I'm gonna talk basically about the currents. So this is the basically the oceanic currents for the world. Basically, if you see a blue current, that means that is a cold current. So cold current, you have to think about, of course, cold weather. You have to think about low precipitation. If you see a red current, that means there's a hot current. So a lot of rain, warmer waters, warmer temperature basically. And the black arrows basically are neutral currents, so nor hot nor cold. We usually have basically black currents every more or less 30-40 degrees as we go up to the North Pole since the equator. Also, fun stuff. Perisno basically spins as a planet the other way. It doesn't spin like Earth. It spins in what's called a retrograde fashion. So the sun comes up in the west and sets up in the east, different from our own planet. So basically, for talking more or less about the currents, events and how it affects different races, basically the different climates that Perisno has. So let's start with the equator. Usually, the equator has a lot of climates that are very rainy, more so ones if you have basically hot currents. Okay, and we have here basically the Aurora Islands or basically all the lands of the Nafali that are really really rainy. You have to think like rainforest, like the Amazon. There are gonna be a lot of trees, a lot of water, rainy days. Okay, basically because of these hot currents. Now, Tolrania, more Hakan, these guys all over here, vale, they are basically in the middle portion, okay, of the planet. So they have more European, maybe United States, also climate, a more temperate, moderate climate. Okay, there's no more. Basically the most common climate that we see. And then if we go far north, okay, have this patch of snow, big patch of snow, okay, that's basically because well, we are really, really, really far north. There's a lot of rain, there's a lot of snow, basically in the zone, okay. Now, from talking about the desert, because that's more important, because first we have a desert here, and that's it. It's the equator, so it's not the usual thing to have deserts in the equator. Maybe if you go more up, like the Sahara Desert, for example, or more down, but not in the middle of the equator. We have the examples like the Angola Desert in Africa, and that is because two things. First is these cold currents that are here and here that lower precipitation, and second, this mountain range. Okay, there's a phenomenon called basically orthographic lift. That basically is the scientific way of saying if you have mountains and one side is rainy, the other is dry, and that's it basically. So because they have these hot currents that go all the way through here, and then we have this mountain range, then this basically all this rain gets poured in the mountains, and there's no more rain here. So this eventually becomes a desert. And that's basically what happened. This is called the Scabrous Plains. And we have it in the well, we don't have it in Perisno right now in the game, but we will have it in the new map.
It's currently in the Warband map, but it's not accessible, so not really important.
Okay. Now, for talking also about the climate, this zone here is very, very strange, basically, because there's a storm all fucking day, basically. And that's because there's two things that happen. First, we have these big patches of kind of sea, kind of lakes, okay, here and here. And basically, the problem is we have a hot current that goes all the way through here, part of the current, and this cold current goes all the way through here, part of it, okay? The problem is there's a phenomenon basically goes in big lakes, okay, and this happens in Venezuela, for example, which is the catacumbo phenomenon. That when you have hot water, but there is also really or cold water or maybe cold air coming from the mountains in different parts, okay, you have a phenomenon that basically makes that it causes storms almost all day around. Okay, it's like I think in Venezuela, in this particular lake, there are like storms that can last like 12 hours, and that is like more than 2 or 3 times a week. It's a really, really, and basically that's is in a small lake. If you have a really big lake that we have here or here, that phenomenon will be turned up to 11. So it's not basically the best land that you want, to be honest. And now, from talking more about sea travel between continents, basically, I suppose I will start with Tauranians, basically. So Tauranians come from Hakonia. Right now they are here. They come from here. So basically, the thing is, it's really difficult. It's a really perilous journey, to be honest, because there's a problem in the equator for the ships. Okay, if you are a ship, basically you are going to you cannot go against the current. Okay, it's really difficult because also currents basically are correlated to the winds. So sailing against the wind pretty difficult in ancient times. So the Tauranians had to pass through here, and this is the equator. And the problem with the equator is basically there's no wind. So it's really difficult, of course. They were guided by the Ruark and some other things, but they accomplished to pass through the equator, and then basically they keep with the Sonic currents, and they came here, and basically they established here. So that's the way they came to Perisno, even they went for Hakonia. Now we have another commerce is the Balahir. The Balahir were originally for this Pandit design, if I'm not mistaken, right, Mitch?
That is correct. Listen, yeah.
And basically they have a direct route. It's not difficult for them, to be honest. Also they can more or less get back easily, more or less through here. It's more difficult, but even then, I think if not, I'm not mistaken, Mitch, the Balahir were escaping from the Balahar, right? So they don't want to come back, to be honest.
No, there's a few different factions up there in the Nissinian snowy lands that we haven't introduced yet. There's a lot of stuff going on up there, and Balahir and Balahir are just the two that have found their way to Perisno so far. But yeah, that's the basic backstory for now.
Mm-hmm. And then we have, of course, we have to talk about the Sun also, because the Sun also came from this. And they, as you know, they basically appear here, basically all around Paris. Okay, but the main thing that they have is the Sunford here. So basically, what they do is they go to this current, and then here, when you have two currents that are really close together, it's possible to basically skip and jump from one current to the other, because here the wind is not really difficult, but you have a good day, maybe wind is blowing favorably, you can do it. Basically, it's something that the Draken also did. I'm going to explain that later. And also they basically is how they establish the sun fort. And then basically the sun appear here. It's easy for them to go here directly. They also appear even here, and this is not difficult for them. They only have to take this current, keep the current in the equator. They basically do this or even do this, and they can even get here in both. So it's not difficult, to be honest. Perisno is easy invaded by this area. The currents really favor the sun, to be honest. Which Perisno only the only way Perisno could ever invade this area is basically here, only in this spot. Now for the Draken. The Draken basically came also to Perisno. They have it's easy for them also to came to Perisno because basically this current, even if it comes down eventually, okay, the same that happened there with the sun, you can skip it. It's even easier because this current starts going through this. Of course, the winds are going to blow this way in this basically in this quadrant of the wall, but that's not important now. So you can skip it, and then basically you keep going to the current, and you make it here, which is basically the land story now, where they put out the Ilika Falki. The problem for the Dragon is they don't have an easier time, to be honest, going back. Even if it has basically this current for going back, the problem is you have this isle, you have these lands, but here they are water. This is water. So usually what is going to pass is that this current is going to try to go to there, so it's really difficult to pass it and get to this current. So the only way probably will be to conquer the Balahir and then came back, but that's a task easier said than done. So you can expect a lot of Draken wars with Balahir to try to control this. They are interested, but I don't know if they will eventually accomplish that or not. Also for the Kulan Horde, it's really easy from this island. It's basically they have two options. It's like whenever they move, they get super busy, to be honest. And the last faction basically we have to talk is the Hakan, which also came from Hakonia, but they appear here basically instead of here. And basically the thing is that of course the Turania were like they came to Perisno like 400 years ago. The Hakons are much more newcomers than the Turanians, so they have they have improved their ships a little. So this, if you can, because the problem is if you take this current, you go through a desert, so you don't do anything. If you take this current, you are just going around Hakon, you don't do nothing. So you have to basically go between these two currents, which is not an easier task, but if you can accomplish one when you are here, you can basically go through the coast, and it's easier to get basically to Hakonlands right now. Basically, if you wanna see how the map will look if we put it on a plane, this is basically it. Also for the climates, of other continents, basically Nisania, this is to the north, so it's snowy, the same basically as here. Have the Isle of the Draken is also snowy. Mid to far north, we have this this desert here basically, which is possible. I mean, it's not in the equator. That's a problem. Before I had it in the equator, so it was really difficult. Now being here is more akin to basically where the Sahara will be, so it's perfectly possible to have it there. And Hakonia basically, because it's not completely in this quadrant, like for example, to put Tolrania is basically in this quadrant completely. They don't jump to this. Hakon is like 50-50 basically, and they have also this here and this here, these two small seas of basically currents that make it so Hakonia doesn't have like a really cold current or a really hot current affecting them. The climate will be more akin to the Mediterranean. Okay, it will be more a Mediterranean climate all around the basically the Isle of Hakonia or the continent of Hakonia.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is it. I don't know if I'm forgetting something that I told you, Mitch.
That's pretty much all I remembered. I mean, that's mostly I wanted you to cover.
Mhm.
It's really well done. Um,
Thank you.
I yeah, I don't think I could have come up with that when I designed the map, but I did try to use real world stuff and then some
Mhm.
light fantasy elements as well. But I think you did a really good job of getting the currents to work. So
It was easier. I mean, I think you did a really good job because if you tweak, two or three things, like everything came in place. So it wasn't. It's something that okay, this is clearly done with thought. You know.
yeah, yeah. It's this map has actually been in work in progress for the last 10 years. So it's not something that was done overnight. But yeah.
Mhm.
Also, if I bring up the actual, I don't know if you have the newest one right now. Let's see.
No, I have to send it to you.
Okay.
I was basically ordering the layers to be able to explain.
Okay. Did you explain the new Hakan cities that are going to be eventually in the new map?
I don't have it here in this map. That's the problem. But basically, we have, and this is not really
Mm-hmm.
quality, but we have Amarna here. This is Aris. This is Crane. Okay, Amarna will be moved here to the coast, basically, because it makes sense. Also, Hakon is a really big naval empire, so it would probably make more sense to them to have coastal cities, more like three land cities. And Crane will be also moved here because it's more logical for a city. Because Amarna is quite new, to be honest, and it's a city that Hakon built. Basically, Hakon came
Mm-hmm.
and they decided, okay, we are going to disembark here and we are going to basically build Amarna. And then we have Crane, which was a city of the Drahara, and of course, it was near water because that's where cities should be.
Yep. So in similar versions of Perisno, the map would be similar to the map on the screen, where Amarna, Crane, and Arish are their new locations, and the whole continent of Geisharr would show up as a playable area. Maybe not in Warband, but in future iterations of Perisno.